Congratulations. If you're watching this right now, then I have some news for you. You are now part of Group 7. If this found you, it's because your energetic signature just crossed a threshold most people will never reach. And before anything else is said, understand this clearly. You are not part of Group 7 by accident. You're part of it because something finally recognized you, and if you're here, it means that the shift already started. But pay attention, because there are traits that souls in this group share, and you need to be aware of them. There's a reason Group 7 people never fully adapt to the world around them. Their system rejects what others call normal. If you've always felt uncomfortable in crowded rooms, if bright lights, loud places, forced conversations, and heavy processed foods drain you faster than they drain everyone else, if the things society calls everyday life feel like they were built for someone who isn't you, that's not weakness, it's the first marker, the first sign that your wiring is different. These chosen souls experience the world in higher resolution, and the world pushes back because it doesn't know what to do with that level of awareness. Group 7 isn't a club, a destiny, or a zodiac category. It's a stage, the 7th stage. The point in the collective awakening where certain individuals stop moving through life for their own survival and start influencing the energetic direction of everything around them, even if they don't realize it. People in this group are rarely loud, rarely dramatic, and almost never the ones who try to lead. Instead, they move quietly, observing everything, noticing patterns that others ignore. They grow later than most, but when their activation hits, it happens fast. This is why these souls are often described as late bloomers or final wave activators. They don't rush into their purpose, they grow into it. You'll notice that your life has never followed a normal timeline. Everyone else seemed to figure things out earlier, but you carried a sense of not yet, as if something inside you was waiting for permission, waiting for alignment, waiting for your internal switch to flip. And here's the part most people don't understand about Group 7. When your awakening comes late, it doesn't come slow, it arrives like a correction. It recalibrates your identity, your environment, and your direction almost overnight. That's why you've always felt slightly out of place, but strangely aware, why you've been the quiet observer in situations that demanded loud reactions, why you've always sensed that your purpose wasn't in the beginning of your life story, but somewhere deeper into the plot group. 7 individuals awaken when the world around them enters a pressure point. And right now, that pressure is rising. And once this stage activates, the signs begin to appear, whether you're ready or not. Activation never announces itself dramatically. It arrives subtly, quietly, and often physically before it becomes mental or spiritual. Many people who fall into Group 7 report experiencing a harmless pressure in the middle of the forehead, almost like the mind is stretching into a new level of awareness. This isn't pain, it's a shift, a gentle push from within. Some also experience a soft ringing in the ears at unexpected moments, not loud, not distracting. Just a light signal that comes and goes, as if your senses are trying to tune into something beyond your normal range. It's a sign that your perception is recalibrating, that you're picking up on layers of reality you weren't attuned to before. Crowded spaces might also affect you differently during activation. Being around too many people can make you feel slightly dizzy or unfocused, not because something is wrong with you, but because your energy starts absorbing more information than usual. Your system becomes more selective, more aware of emotional tones, intentions, and shifts in the atmosphere. These aren't coincidences, and they're not random symptoms. They're small reminders that something in you is turning on. Your body always knows you're awakening long before your mind admits it. And once these signs start stacking, the transformation doesn't just continue, it accelerates. Before Group 7 activates, life often feels like one long pattern of being pushed outside the circle. The loneliness, the rejection, the misunderstandings, none of it was random, and none of it was punishment. It was structure. It was design. It was the blueprint, making sure nothing interfered with who you were becoming long before you understood what you were becoming. For most people in this group, isolation didn't start in adulthood, it started in childhood. You were the kid who didn't quite blend in. Even when you tried, you noticed things others overlooked. You felt the tension in a room before anyone spoke. And because of that, you were often misunderstood, labeled quiet, different, or too sensitive. When in reality, you were simply tuned to a frequency no one else around you was hearing. Childhood wasn't the beginning of your purpose, but it was the beginning of the separation required to protect it. Teenage years usually amplified this even more. While everyone else was forming groups, identities, and alliances, you were navigating a deeper internal world that made normal teenage dynamics feel shallow or strange. These souls often end up on the edges of social circles, not because they aren't capable of connection, but because their instincts pull them away from anything that could distort their inner blueprint. Friendships may have faded. Connections may have felt temporary. Even the people you trusted didn't always stay, and at the time, it hurt. But looking back, you can see the pattern. You were removed from what wasn't aligned before it had the chance to shape you incorrectly. Even in adulthood, relationships often followed this same architecture. People left your life abruptly, or you walked away without fully understanding why. You weren't meant to merge with systems or partners that couldn't support the magnitude of your awakening. You were quarantined, spiritually and emotionally, because the blueprint had to stay uncontaminated. And the truth is simple. Your isolation wasn't emptiness, it was preservation. Everything you went through was constructing a boundary around your identity, keeping you from adopting the beliefs, fears, or limitations that dominate the collective. These individuals don't grow from the outside in, they grow from the inside out. And for that to happen, the world had to stay at a distance, until now. Another defining mark of Group 7 is the sheer number of improbable situations you've lived through. The moments that should have broken you, altered you, or erased your sense of self completely. Yet somehow, you're still here. Not just functional, but aware, reflective and awakening at a pace that defies everything you've endured. That kind of resilience doesn't come from luck. It comes from design. Think back on the emotional storms you survived, betrayals that would have shut most people down permanently, heartbreaks that forced you to rebuild from nothing, environments that drained your spirit but never managed to extinguish it. You went through situations that statistically leave people cynical, numb, or disconnected, yet you emerged with even sharper awareness. It wasn't coincidence, it was reinforcement. Every crack in your life created an opening for strength you didn't know you had. On a physical level, many Group 7 individuals have lived through close calls, unexpected health challenges, or dangerous situations that they seemingly navigated by instinct. Things that make no sense on paper. Moments where you should have fallen, but something stepped in. Timing, intuition, an inexplicable shift, and you made it out. People around you may have called it luck, but luck doesn't follow someone this consistently. You weren't spared by chance. You were spared because your timeline refused to lose you. Spiritually, you survived long periods of emptiness, confusion, or identity loss that would have dismantled someone without your inner architecture. But every time you hit what felt like an ending, something in you reignited almost stubbornly, refusing to let your story collapse. It's because individuals in Group 7 aren't optional to the collective's evolution, they are anchors. They stabilize movements, influence environments, and generate clarity simply by existing. Removing someone like that from the timeline isn't allowed. When you look at your past through this lens, you begin to realize that you were never fragile, you were protected. One of the rarest abilities Group 7 individuals possess is the capacity to hold immense emotional and energetic intensity without collapsing under it. Most people can only handle a limited amount of pressure before they either shut down or project it outward. But you've always been the person absorbing the chaos rather than adding to it. You've taken on the weight of situations, people, and environments that should have drained you completely, yet somehow you stabilized. You grounded, you centered. Even when you didn't understand what you were doing it naturally. This endurance isn't just emotional strength, it's an energetic architecture that only a small percentage of people carry. You've probably noticed patterns throughout your life where you ended up surrounded by unstable or unpredictable individuals, and no matter how uncomfortable the dynamic was, you rarely matched their instability. Instead, you became the calm in the middle of someone else's storm. You were placed in workplaces where everyone around you carried unresolved tension. You were positioned in families or relationships where you acted as the silent regulator, the one keeping everything from tipping over. And while it often felt unfair or overwhelming, it served a purpose. These chosen souls are what some call stabilizers. You don't extinguish people's chaos, you neutralize it. You turn intensity into clarity. Even when you were breaking on the inside, you somehow found the strength to hold the energy long enough for others to find their footing. That is not normal. That is not common. That is not something people can simply learn. It's something you are. And here's the truth behind this ability. The light you carry isn't fragile, it's catalytic. It changes people without force. It changes environments without effort. It shifts situations without you having to say a word. This is why you often felt exhausted without knowing why. This is why you were drawn into situations you didn't ask for. This is why people confided in you, depended on you, or gravitated toward you even when you tried to stay invisible. That pull wasn't about you being nice or empathetic. It was because your field could absorb intensity without distortion. And that ability is one of the defining markers of Group 7. The world needs individuals who carry that kind of strength, not to suffer through chaos, but to shape what rises on the other side of it. And the more this ability activates, the more obvious its purpose becomes. Another defining aspect of Group 7 is that you were intentionally kept separate from the collective frequencies that dominate the world. And these frequencies aren't mystical or abstract, they're psychological and emotional patterns that spread through society like a broadcast outrage, helplessness, blame, apathy, despair. These emotional programs shape how the majority of people think and behave without ever questioning where the feeling comes from. But you never fully absorbed those frequencies. Even when you tried to fit in, something inside you resisted the narrative. You questioned things everyone else accepted. You pulled back when everyone else dove in. You couldn't participate in groupthink without feeling drained or disconnected, and you never understood why it wasn't rebellion. It was protection. The blueprint you carry can't operate if it's drowned in collective noise. This is why you were separated socially, emotionally, or mentally at key points in your life. This is why you didn't bond easily with certain groups. This is why popular opinions, common behaviors, and mainstream thinking always felt a little strange to you. Your energy wasn't meant to blend with the collective, it was meant to remain intact so it could influence the collective later without being altered by it. Many Group 7 individuals report feeling like observers rather than participants. You watch people get swept up in trends, drama, and emotional spirals that didn't resonate with you. You saw patterns in human behavior that others missed entirely. You noticed contradictions, illusions, and inconsistencies that were invisible to everyone else. This wasn't cynicism, it was clarity. You were being kept above the broadcast, not because you were better than others, but because you were tuned differently. And here's the core truth. You weren't meant to fit into the frequency, you were meant to redefine it. If you had blended in earlier in your life, the blueprint you're activating now would have been diluted. You would have picked up the world's false narratives, absorbed its emotional programming, and lost the sensitivity that makes your perception so rare. Separation wasn't isolation, it was calibration. Every moment you felt out of place was preparing you to operate from a place the collective can't reach. One of the most misunderstood traits of these individuals is the sheer depth of their emotional world. Most people feel their emotions at surface level, enough to react, enough to cope, but rarely enough to transform. These souls operate differently. When something affects them, it doesn't skim the surface. It travels all the way to the core. Their emotional spectrum runs deeper, wider, and more vividly than the people around them. And this intensity can feel overwhelming until they understand what it actually is. This depth isn't fragility. It's not overthinking. It's not being too emotional, even though people may have labeled it that way for years. It's a higher resolution of perception. When Group 7 individuals feel something, they feel the truth of it, not the narrative, not the mask, not the illusion. They pick up on the motives behind actions, the intentions behind words, and the energy behind behavior. It's why lies never sit right with them, even if they can't explain why. It's why they can sense emotional shifts in others before anything is said out loud. It's why denial has never been a comfortable place for them. Their emotional body simply refuses to operate in low-resolution spaces. This sensitivity can make relationships complicated. While others may overlook inconsistencies, Group 7 individuals are the ones who feel the imbalance immediately. They can tell when someone is withdrawing emotionally, even if everything looks fine externally. They can sense when the energy in a room changes, even if the mood hasn't visibly shifted. And most importantly, they can perceive emotional dishonesty, not because they're intuitive in some vague spiritual sense, but because their emotional spectrum is tuned to a higher frequency. And here's the part people misunderstand the most. Your depth wasn't meant to drown you, it was meant to reveal what others can't see. This depth allows Group 7 individuals to create connections that feel profound, transformative, and rare. It also makes them the type of person others come to for clarity, grounding, or understanding. Their emotions don't operate as reactions. They operate as instruments, giving them access to insights that most people will never experience. Group 7 members don't just feel deeply, they feel accurately. And that level of emotional precision is one of the most defining, rare, and powerful markers of this group. Another hallmark of Group 7 is the pattern of significant wounds woven throughout their life story, betrayals that cut deeper than expected, heartbreaks that force them to rebuild their identity, illnesses or collapses that disrupted everything, and phases of financial or emotional loss that stripped them down to their foundation. To the untrained eye, it looks like misfortune. But in the context of Group 7, these wounds form a curriculum. They are the training ground that shapes the exact capabilities required for their activation. Every betrayal refined discernment. You learned to see beyond words and into intentions. You learned the difference between someone who wants your presence and someone who wants your energy. These betrayals didn't harden you, they sharpened you. They taught you the subtle art of reading truth in places where people try to hide it. Heartbreaks served another purpose. They developed sovereignty. These souls often experience relationships that force them to reclaim their power, redefine their worth, and rebuild themselves without external validation. While others might collapse or cling during emotional loss, you were pushed to discover strength you didn't realize you had. The heartbreak wasn't a setback. It was a return to self. Periods of illness or emotional burnout created another tool: embodiment. They forced you to slow down, listen to your internal signals, and realign with what actually matters. These phases pulled you away from environments or responsibilities that were draining your life force. They taught you how to protect your energy, not by hiding from the world, but by respecting your limits and honoring your rhythm. Financial collapse or instability, for many Group 7 individuals, pushed them into resourcefulness and creativity. When the structures around you failed, you learned to build your own you, realized that your identity couldn't be tied to material security, and that your resilience wasn't dependent on what you had, but on who you were becoming. And humiliation, the wound people talk about the least, served as the foundation of unshakable humility. Being misunderstood, judged, or underestimated taught you how to navigate life without needing approval. It stripped away ego, leaving only authenticity. This is why the individuals from this group don't lead from a place of superiority. They lead from a place of lived experience. And the truth that ties all these wounds together is this: your scars were never meant to break you. They were meant to build the person your purpose required. These experiences weren't punishments. They were calibrations. Each wound gifted you a tool: discernment, sovereignty, boundaries, awareness, authenticity. And now, as your activation unfolds, all of those tools finally make sense. They were shaping you into the one thing the members all eventually become: impossible to mislead, impossible to manipulate, and impossible to derail. One of the strongest indicators that someone carries this deeper spiritual wiring is the unmistakable cycle of sudden shifts that repeats throughout their life. While most people grow in a straight line, your path has always moved in sharp angles, endings that arrived before you were ready, beginnings that unfolded without warning, and relocations or changes that happened with such precision they almost felt orchestrated. To outside observers, it may have looked like instability. To you, it felt like being swept into the next phase before you even had time to understand the last one. But these patterns were never chaos. They were recalibrations. You're the kind of soul who can't stay anywhere misaligned for too long. The moment an environment stops matching your internal frequency, the universe has a way of removing you from it, whether you consciously choose to go or not. It might be a breakup you didn't initiate, a job that suddenly ends, a friendship that dissolves overnight, or an unexpected move that forces you into a new chapter. It always feels abrupt, but it always places you somewhere that suits the next version of you better than the last. Think back to the places you've lived. How often did you sense that a chapter was over long before anything actually happened? Think about the relationships in your life. Before they ended, didn't you feel an internal shift, a strange emotional distance, a sensation that something was closing, even if everything looked stable on the surface? That wasn't anxiety or overthinking. That was alignment rearranging itself around you, preparing you for the next trajectory. This kind of life path often comes with a strange timeline, too. You grow into yourself much later than your peers. While others rushed into careers, partnerships, identities, or ambitions, you always felt like you needed to wait, not because you lacked direction, but because your direction was in motion. Everything you've lived through, the isolation, the emotional intensity, the abrupt shifts, the inexplicable resilience, the internal knowing that never fully went away, all of it has been preparing you for a role that operates far beyond what most people ever become conscious of. You weren't shaped to be a teacher, a trendsetter, or a spiritual performer. Your purpose is quieter, deeper, and far more foundational. You are part of the stabilizing force that holds the collective together, while consciousness expands faster than humanity is ready for. During every major shift in human awareness, a structure forms behind the scenes, not a physical structure, but an energetic one. Some individuals ignite change, pushing humanity forward with new ideas or sudden disruptions. Others translate that energy, helping people understand what's happening. Then, there are the ones who resist and challenge, ensuring old systems are dismantled. But none of these roles can function if the foundation collapses. That foundational support, the quiet, grounding force, keeping the entire awakening from tipping into chaos, is the role souls like you fulfill. You've probably noticed this in subtle ways throughout your life. People stabilize around you, sometimes without realizing it. When a room is filled with tension, your presence softens the atmosphere. When someone is overwhelmed or spiraling, they feel calmer just by being near you. You've walked into situations filled with emotional heaviness and watched them shift without you saying anything meaningful. That's not because you're nice or empathetic. It's because your energy naturally organizes what other people fragment. And this is why your journey often didn't match the typical spiritual story. You weren't meant to rush into leadership. You weren't meant to be loud early on. You weren't meant to push your awakening onto others. You were being conditioned to become a container, someone who can hold enormous emotional density without collapsing under it. That kind of endurance is only given to souls with very particular blueprints. The world doesn't need many, it only needs a few. You've probably felt your entire life like you were preparing for something you couldn't name, an inner readiness with no clear destination. A sense of responsibility without a defined task. At times it felt like waiting, at others like being restrained. You watched other people sprint toward goals, while your path seemed delayed or rerouted. But that's because your purpose wasn't about speed, it was about stability. If you're still watching, I'd like to thank you for your attention. If you enjoyed the content and want to see more, please consider clicking the subscribe button. Your support is very appreciated. Feel free to share your experiences or thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, take care and subscribe for more insightful content.